I've been hunting my whole life. I've been studying animals' behavior and communication for over 30 years. And about 2 decades ago, I founded a company, Illusion, to create game call systems so you could talk to animals. And now it's time to share that information. Welcome to Deer Society's Calling Tips. So we've learned the proper technique on how to hold the black rack properly, and we've learned the technique on how to bring the black rack together to start to make the sound. Your grip, strong grip on the bottom. I'm actually not even really holding on to that, but my thumbs do go up above, okay? My call or my rack comes together at the top. My hands stay separated, and then I just turn and twist. And the reason we do that is because when deer come together, they're not rams. They're not coming in here going bam, bam, bam. What they're doing is they're coming together in an initial lock, and they're pushing, and they're trying to beat each other up by strength. And they're turning their heads to try and get good position. It's kind of like just a duel of who's going to get the best position and be able to drive the other guy off. So they come together like that, and then they start pushing and turning and grinding, and that's where you get that natural sound. So when you rattle, you want to sound just like what they sound like when they're coming together. So you have to picture that into your mind. Now, let's talk a little bit about control of volume here, because when it comes to rattling, it's just like any other calling. You have to be able to control your volume. And there's a time to be aggressive, and there's a time to be mellow, and there's a time to mimic younger bucks. There's a time to mimic middle-aged bucks. There's a time to mimic an all-out battle to the death. So these are things that you want to take into consideration when it comes to technique. If I want to rattle lightly, say it's early season, and these guys, remember, a lot of these bucks will live together all summer long and hang out together. They know each other. They're buddies during the summer. But when it comes time for breeding rights, that's when you start getting that pecking order. They're definitely working the pecking order at that point. So that's why they have racks, is to set that pecking order. So what you want to think about is as soon as that velvet comes off is when you can start to actually rattle, if you'd like. And if you're going to rattle that time, you want it light. So how do we get light? It's real simple. Keep the same technique. Hold the rack properly, hold it the same way, but instead of coming together hard, all you're going to do is just ease that together and just do some light turning. I'm putting very little pressure on this rack at all. I'm just and that's all them deer are doing. If you've ever seen it that time of the year, they just kind of come together and they look at each other, and then they kind of pull their nose down, and the other one pulls his nose down while they're feeding or something in an area, and they just kind of come together. They're not coming together hard. They're not pushing. They're not slamming their heads together. They're just kind of like, kind of feeling their rack out. How many tines do I have? Maybe they're thinking, how big is my rack compared to your rack? And they're just tickling. We call it tickling. And so this can be extremely effective when it comes to when they're at that time of the year when they're getting ready to set that pecking order. They may not be pushing each other around or mad at each other yet, but they might be setting the pecking order. And if you're doing some of that light tickling and they hear that in their core area, they may come over and investigate what's going on. The same thing with does. Does come into this. They're still with their fawns. They're wondering what's going on. What's going on over here? Who's over here now? Who's in my area? Maybe they're just interested. What are the genetics of the bucks that are around my core area? So tickle rattling, early season, light volume. No, I'm hardly putting pressure. And so that's light rattling. So now let's talk a little bit about technique of actual fighting, battling, and just going at it, Now what we're doing is we're fighting for supremacy. And that's a whole different concept. Now, what age class deer do that? Well, they all kind of do it. It really just depends on the situation and the environment you're in. It depends on the age structure of the deer where you're hunting. But when they get mad at each other and they're beyond setting pecking order and they're actually fighting for a reason, it's completely different than a spar or a tickle and feeling each other out. They're mad now, and now we're literally, this is a bar fight, okay? And that's a good way to look at it, because when you're out rattling, that's really the instinct that you're trying to have happen within a deer, is that when you rattle it and you fight certain times of the year, it's just like a bar fight or a fight at school. Remember back in the day, fight, breaks out, everybody comes running to go see what's going on. That's exactly what you're doing here. So you're creating this fight and you want to make it sound like it's a fight. So now the most important part of this is your grip, okay? You have to have your hands located in the right spot, and down on the bottom of these tines is extremely important. You don't want to be smashing your hands together. You don't want to be knuckle busting and stuff like that. You got to watch what you're doing here. Having gloves on definitely is something I highly recommend. So when you're wearing your gloves and you're holding this rack, you're definitely holding way down on the bottom, and you're really focusing on slamming this thing together with your hands separate at the bottom and really letting them have it. So you come in and you come in hard, okay? Because these deer are mad now. So you don't want to keep those hands together and smash your knuckles together. You want to twist the wrist, if you will. And so you keep your wrists apart and you come together and you just boom, and you slam it. Now, some of our pro staff, there's a window out there. It's kind of varies, but typically it's like the end of October, beginning of November in some places, and even way down south it can be into, December, January. But there's a window when deer are really reacting to rattling, and the fight rattling, the brawl rattling. And it's that bar fight where everybody comes running. And when you hit that window, you have got to have a set of these in your hands. I've had, it's not uncommon to rattle in 3-4 bucks in the morning and within an hour or two. Some of our pro staff have rattled in 10 deer in one day. And that's that window I'm talking about. Now, one of the techniques that I noticed that one of our pro staff was using is when they come together, them deer come together hard, is he was actually turning the backs of the black rack to each other, and he could get a lot more sound on the initial clash by smashing them together and hitting the backs. Now, the key to this is to find the right spot for it, okay? You want to be somewhere right in the tine area, right along this area in the frame, the main frame, and then you smash those two kind of together. So this is kind of the core smashing area, and you're trying to hit it in the tines and along that frame. And you just slap it together, and you'll hear the sound once you get it. And you get that first smash, it's that bone-on-bone smash, and then you come together like that. So that's the technique that he used, and he rattled in like $8 that day, so I'm not going to say it doesn't work because I watched it work. So it's just something to keep in mind. When the deer are ultra aggressive, that's one technique you might want to try, okay? Ultra aggressive now. If you do this in a time when they're not aggressive at all, then you're probably just wasting your time, or you could even potentially be spooking deer. So just keep that in mind. Now, once again, fighting, technique, slam them things together, and then you grind hard. Now, I'm really letting this go, okay? I am really letting this go. It's slam, 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 and twist. And you're twisting and you're turning. And you keep that top lock now. That's the key to it. Keep the top lock. And then you're twisting and turning the bottom with the top locked all the time. That's the key to it, so you don't bust your hands up and get a little nick on there. Keep those racks, a lot of tension. But now keep in mind, you don't want too much strength and tension into your wrists, because then it's kind of like a golf swing. You're not able to release. And if you're not a golfer, you won't understand what I'm talking about. But if your hands are too tight then you're forcing your arms to push, and you're not going to get as quickness of a sound. But if you keep those wrists loose, but you got a good grip, but you're able to really turn the wrist, when you lock together like this, okay, and then you see how my wrists are actually turning and staying loose, you get more of that. You're getting a lot more tine-to-tine sound when you do it that way. So, once again, good stern grip, lock the top together strong, hands apart, keep the wrists loose and twist and turn. Get a lot of that tine-to-tine contact. And that's the best way to that's the best technique to use when it comes to a real all-out fight and a brawl.
The Extinguisher Deer Call and Black Rack Rattling System are the highest-rated deer communication systems of all time. Get yours today at illusionsystems.com. Order now.